Thanks to all of you for being here today. We're very fortunate to have three tremendous nonprofit leaders here to update us on what's happening in the nonprofit world. And let me introduce the three of them. None of them really need an introduction, but I'm going to give them one anyway. So in alphabetical order, our first panelist is Tricia Cunningham. Tricia is the president and CEO of the North Texas Food Bank, a $145 million nonprofit focused on eradicating hunger in a diverse 13-county service area. In 2019, Tricia and her team of 175 employees and 41,000 volunteers worked with more than 250 partner agencies from the North Texas Food Bank feeding network to provide access to almost 77 million meals annually. Prior to joining North Texas Food Bank, she was the Chief Citizenship Officer at Texas Instruments, where she led TI's global social impact strategy, including philanthropy, community engagement, and cross-company sustainability leadership. Tricia was named to the Dallas 500 Most Influential Business Leaders by DCEO magazine in 2019, Dallas Regional Chamber Outstanding Leadership Alumni in 2019, a 2019 Girl Boss by Plano magazine, and a Director Emeritus from Leadership Women. Tricia has a BS in Computer Information Systems with an emphasis in business from Murray State University, and she and her husband, Greg, have two grown children and reside in Fairview. Tricia, thanks very much for being here. And our second panelist is Chad Hauser. Chad is the founder and CEO and executive chef of Cafe Momentum. Always wanted to add a little levity to the conversation, Chad often describes Cafe Momentum as taking kids out of jail and teaching them to play with knives and fire. After 17 years as a chef, Chad sold his partnership of Parigi Restaurant to devote his full attention to the role of executive director of Cafe Momentum in 2012. In the community, Chad has previously served as president of the board of directors for Dallas Farmers Market Friends and as vice chair of the El Centro Exes Association, where he's also a member of the El Centro College Food and Hospitality Institute Hall of Fame. Chad has received multiple nominations from D Magazine for Best Up-and-Coming Chef, Best Chef, and Best Chef, excuse me. And in 2011, he received the Edible Dallas Fort Worth Local Hero Chef Award. In 2017 and again in 2018, Chad has been named in the Best 500 Business Leaders of Dallas. Thank you, Chad, for being here. And our last panelist is Stacy Malcolmson, and Stacy is the president and CEO of the Senior Source. The Senior Source enhances the quality of life of 27,000 older adults in the greater Dallas area each year and has served seniors in the community since 1961. Prior to the Senior Source, Stacy worked in leadership roles at Dallas area Habitat for Humanity, United Way, and at SMU, where she has demonstrated experience in fundraising, donor cultivation, and executing successful capital and annual giving campaigns. Prior to entering the nonprofit world, she developed her marketing skills at Frito-Lay. Stacy earned a BA from the University of Texas at Austin and an MBA from Harvard Business School. She's a member of the Dallas Assembly and sits on the Harvard Business School Fund Council, the Texas Exes 1883 Council, and serves on the governing board and finance committee at St. Michael and All Angels Episcopal Church. And for those of you who don't know, Stacy is married to our CEO, Ken Malcolmson. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to each of our three panelists. And we'll start with Tricia, just to give us an update on what's happening in your world and tell us a little bit more about your organizations. And then we'll have a few questions. And then please, for those participating, send us questions. We do want to hear from you all, and we want this to be interactive. So with that, I'll turn it over to Tricia.
Thanks, Jeff. Well, first of all, thanks so much for allowing me to be here, and I'm honored to be here with Chad and Stacy. I'm just admire both of their organizations as well, and I got to meet both of them whenever I was at the TI as well as Ken, and it's just truly an honor to be part of this community that cares so much about the people. And so I think that's one of the things that we've certainly seen during these times. So just as a raise of hands, how many of you have been out to our new location of the food bank? Okay, so several of you have been out here, so thank you so much. Back in August of 2018, we moved into a new 230,000 square foot facility in Plano. We still have a location in downtown Dallas at the Dallas Farmers Market, and then we still own the building down in South Dallas at South Cockrell Hill. One of our partner agencies occupies that, but our social services team is still there. But I am so thankful that we are in this new location, and many of you helped support it. And also you've helped support us, I think, during this just unprecedented time that we have. And I want to thank you for that before I even go any further, because honestly, without the support of the community, without the capacity that we have here right now, it would be very difficult for us to serve the needs that we have in our community right now. You know, I do try to refer to us as a nonprofit logistics organization. A lot of times people confuse food banking with food pantries, and we do serve more than 250 food pantries and other programs that have feeding sort of programs inside their organization across 13 counties. We are one of 200 food banks across the country that is part of the Feeding America network. I know Feeding America's profile has been raised quite a bit. And so if you equate that to the business side, Feeding America is like, I would call it like our standards and trade organization. They don't distribute food, but they help us to have national contracts, and they help us to advocate on a national level. And they present certain standards that we have to meet, and then also standards that our partner agencies have to meet as well. We serve 10,000 square miles. We go all the way up to the Oklahoma border, and we go all the way down to Navarro County. We go out east towards Hopkins and Kaufman County in that area. And then also we go out west and share Denton County with Tarrant Area Food Bank. So, you know, we try to make sure that every zip code in the United States is covered with a Feeding America food bank. And we try to gauge our needs by looking at the number of people who are food insecure. And food insecurity just means that they really don't know where their next nutritious meal might be coming from. They don't know if they're going to have dinner on the table tonight or not. And it's just a very uncertain time. And we've certainly seen that increase with COVID. Before COVID, we were making great strides, actually. We had we're going to be able to reduce the number of people that were food insecure in our community to probably an all-time low. Now with COVID, we're seeing it sort of jump back up to an all-time high, even higher than the sort of recession time period of our most recent history in 2008. We don't have data that goes all the way back to the Great Depression, but you know, our most recent is with the recession, the Great Recession that we had there. And so we're going to be going from about 700,000 people food insecure to about 1 million people food insecure. And there's just a couple of stats that I will throw out to you, just sort of you understand where we are here in Texas. We are looking at Dallas County, out of all the counties in the United States, to have the 5th highest number of food insecure people in the country. For children, Texas will have the highest number of children who are food insecure at about 2.3 million. And for our North Texas area that the North Texas Food Bank serves, we have the 5th highest number of food insecure children from any other food bank. So that just sort of shows the needs that we have directly in our community, even though you've seen so much economic sort of growth with COVID. A lot of that was halted, and we're going now in the opposite direction. So there's a lot of food that's needed in our community. About 80% goes through those partner agencies that I spoke about that are part of our feeding network. We want to make sure that we get them there because they also can try to assess why are they hungry. So important to address those root cause issues of hunger. And that's where we rely on our feeding network to do that. I mean, do they have a health issue? Have they recently become unemployed? Do they need education services? Are they underemployed? Before COVID, most of the people that we serve that were of working age had jobs. They just weren't able to make it. And so those people are the ones that are continuing to be a little bit deeper in their food insecurity, as a lot of their shifts may have been taken away, or they may have been furloughed, or they just are in a situation where it's very fragile and they just need more food. About 20% is through our own direct distribution. And it is through mobile distributions. Many of you have seen those on TV, the Fair Park distributions. And we also have programs that address children, senior citizens, and then other family programs as well. And we do focus on nutritious food. it's really our vision to make sure that we have not only a hunger-free North Texas, but a healthy North Texas, because we do know that what you put in your stomach is just as important as having food in your stomach. People who are food insecure, which again, that is people that really just don't know where their next nutritious meal or their meal in general will come from, they have higher incidences of medical issues, so diabetes, heart conditions, and other things. And it also, think about this with COVID, it makes them more vulnerable to other health issues. So whenever you're seeing that many of the people that are food insecure in our community are also where you see higher incidence of COVID, I don't have any research that supports this, but it certainly seems to make sense since we know that they are more vulnerable to health concerns. I know we're going to talk a lot more about COVID later, so I'm going to stop there on the food bank, but I did just want to mention just briefly that with all the issues that are going around with social injustice in our community, that the food bank has always served anyone, no matter of their racial ethnicity or their political affiliation or what zip code they live in, with dignity and respect. And I can tell you, we serve every zip code in all 13 counties. And so, but what we are trying to do in this area, and this happened even before the latest happenings came up, we do realize that while we had data on a county level, that really wasn't sufficient for us to be able to understand where the greatest needs were without access to resources. So we've been able to drill that down, working with Bain Consulting, to a zip code level. Now, all of our data seems to be a little dated now after COVID. We had done this before COVID, so we're going to have to sort of layer on what COVID may look like to those zip codes, but we're trying to make sure that strategically that we're investing in equitable food distribution as well, to make sure that people that need access to food have access to food in their own community. So I'll stop there.
Thanks, Tricia. Chad, how are you? Tell us what's going on with Cafe Momentum these days.
I was just on the phone with our COO this morning, and I asked her if it was possible that we could just have one plain week, just one boring, no frills week. That would be absolutely amazing. We take a lot of pride in consistently being ranked as one of the top restaurants in Dallas, because it does prove to the young men and young women that we serve and to the community that they can and will rise to whatever level of expectation is set for them. But of course, I think what gets lost in a lot of that shuffle is we're so much more than just a restaurant. In fact, I often joke that the revenue from the restaurant accounts for about 30% of our overall operating budget. And that's about what the restaurant is about 30% of the work that we do. We have, in addition to the restaurant, built a community services center where our team of case managers, our staff psychologist, education coordinator, curriculum coordinator, program director work to build an ecosystem of support around the kids, so that more than just giving them a job and life skills and social skills, we're building that ecosystem of support and holistically addressing all the issues and barriers that had previously pushed them on a path to detention. And we realized, well, I'll backtrack a little bit. A lot of focus and the work that we've done has been on recidivism, and we've drastically reduced the recidivism rate from nearly 50% to just over 15% since we started working with these kids. But our mission statement says that our goal is to help the kids achieve their full potential. So I love the stats that we're coming up with now. When you look at, we worked with 182 kids last year, and 54% of them were high school dropouts. And a week from Saturday, we're doing a drive-through graduation ceremony, because 9 kids will have graduated from our homeschool program. That's 9 previous high school dropouts, with 3 more that graduated last December, and all of them are eligible to go to college for free through Dallas County Community Colleges, because they've offered free tuition for our kids. So I love stuff like that, because that's a far cry from just keeping somebody out of jail. That's setting them up for success throughout their life. We had to take a pause and a step back in the middle of March before we heard the rumors of the shelter-in-place orders coming about. But we knew just based on consumer habit that people had lost confidence in going out to eat. They were anxious about going out to eat. The last week that we were open, we went from being half full on Thursday night to a little over a third full on Friday night to having only 7 tables on Saturday night. And that Sunday morning, right as spring break was kicking off, our COO texted me and said, should we just shut the restaurant down? And for me, that wasn't something that we could even think to do, because so much of the work that we do focuses on our hours of influence with the kids. In other words, we know that any human being is influenced 24 hours a day. Teenagers seem to extend that out to like being influenced 48 hours in a single day. So we knew that we had to keep all of our programming going. We needed to keep up with our hours of influence, not just for basic needs, but we knew that as historically happens, when you have catastrophic events or some type of crisis, it affects communities of color first and typically worst. So we knew that we had to think through our model. We still had to keep those hours of influence, and we still needed to keep income for the kids as well. It was literally within 30 minutes of that text exchange that I received an email from one of our supporters that was lamenting that Richardson schools were going on spring break. They weren't coming back, and there was a large number of students that were going to be without food because they're dependent on the school for their basic nutritional needs. And did I know how to help? Did I know what to do? And my first thought was, I am not calling Trisha with this problem because I can only imagine what is going on in her world right now. And then just a light bulb went off, and I thought, why don't we do it? Why don't we do something? And put together a phone call with some of our chief donors that evening, bounced the idea off of them. They didn't think I was crazy. And within 72 hours, we had flipped the restaurant into a food hub. And as of this Friday, we will have put out over 280,000 meals for food insecure students and their families in the last 13 weeks. And it's all been donation driven. We've had some incredible folks stepping up, foundations stepping up, donating so that we could procure the ingredients to be able to put together these meal kits and send them off to students in Richardson ISD, families through Feed Lake Highlands, families through 4 Oak Cliff, and then a couple of DISD schools. It's been amazing. But what's been, I think, to me, the most amazing part of the process is watching the kids. A lot of them use the term full circle in describing how it feels to be making meal kits going out to families that are in need. And a lot of them can tell you very vivid and candid stories about being on the other side of that and receiving food and looking for folks to provide them food. So for them to be able to do it, I'm just hoping and praying that that's an empowering enough feeling that they'll continue to take that into their communities long past when we eventually get past the pandemic crisis and look at it as a thing of the past.
Thanks, Chad. That's great. Stacy, how are you? How's the senior source? Tell us how what's going on in your world.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Jeff. And it's great to hear from Trisha and Chad really leading the efforts as it relates to food insecurity. I'll just give you a little bit of a background of the senior source because you may not be as familiar with us as you are with some of the other nonprofits, but we have been enhancing the quality of life of older adults in Greater Dallas since 1961. So we are a senior ourselves. We turn 60 next year. And we achieve this mission by providing financial and emotional resources to the most active and the most vulnerable seniors. As Jeff mentioned, we serve over 27,000 older adults in Greater Dallas each year. We do that with a few different ways. We improve financial security through employment, frauds and scams, advocacy, and money management. We reduce the stress of those caring for loved ones through education and intensive case management. We place senior volunteers in preschools, and we place senior volunteers with homebound older adults to enhance their sense of purpose. And we visit all 300 plus nursing home and assisted living facilities in Dallas County to make sure the residents' rights are being honored and their complaints are heard. So during this pandemic, we have really had to pivot to ensure seniors who are now more isolated than ever are having their basic needs met. So I'll just kind of remind you some of the things that seniors are facing that you may not have thought of is really the fact that so many seniors are food insecure. So not only are they could be without a job, they could have family members moving in with them, they're not able to get out. They're not able to go get that food. So we at the Senior Source provide assistance with gas and electric bill payments through our partners at Atmos Energy. Thank you, Susan Harris. That puts money back in the client's pockets to pay for food and prescription drugs. One client shared that our helping her pay her electric bill meant she could actually afford groceries that month. Another client shared his embarrassment for actually needing to apply for food benefits, something he'd never done. As you can imagine, social isolation is a huge concern right now for seniors. It is for all of us, but we need to recognize that older adults who previously not reported being socially isolated may be disproportionately affected by the requirements of social isolation because of the removal of social contacts, which their outing for the day may have been grocery shopping, attending church, or a community group. And so they're really, really isolated. And then finally, the onset of the COVID crisis has led to a wave of earlier than planned retirements. And if you retire early, you have to pay for your own health insurance. Your decline in Social Security benefits when you can start taking them really puts a huge strain on their wallet. So we are really, and we can talk more about how we are meeting these needs, but those are some of the impacts that we're seeing. And then I'll finally mention, as you can imagine, all the nursing homes and the residents have been without their family members. They've had a lack of staff, and our ombudsmen who go visit the nursing homes and assisted living facilities at least once a month have not been able to. So those seniors are really, really, I think, at risk of abuse. They could be at risk of not having their complaints and needs met. And so we are working to address those, but it's really hard doing that virtually and over the phone and not in person.
Thanks, Stacy. The first question I had planned to ask y'all was to talk about how your organizations were pivoting during the COVID-19 times, but y'all have addressed that. So tell us a little bit more about what you're doing there, but also some of the challenges that you're seeing to implement some of those pivots right now.
Well, I actually didn't address a lot of it myself, so I will go through some of the challenges that we face. So, you know, just much like what Chad described, is right before spring break, we started seeing everything just sort of go crazy. We literally had people that were standing at the front door stopping their corporate volunteers from coming in just because they were concerned about them being in a group setting, because they had told their employees not to do that and to work from home. And so coming to volunteer was not an option for them. We were seeing needs skyrocket. So we had a situation where we needed more volunteers to meet the need. The needs were going up. We also had a supply chain that was becoming very fragile because people were going to the grocery stores and buying all the staples that would normally be a donation stream for us in particular. And we also had to shift our business model 180 degrees. So typically we would provide a very grocery store-like shopping experience through our partner agencies, and we would ship them pallets of food, which is a very efficient way to distribute food. Well, that wasn't going to work now. They're going to need to move to a very safe way to be able to distribute product. So we were actually now kitting product with a box of about 25 pounds of nutritionally balanced food that a family could use for about 20 to 30 meals, 25 pounds food. And so that requires more food of the same kind, more volunteer resources to be able to pack it, more supplies. And so it was a very crazy few weeks as we were trying to pivot to be able to do that. So, you know, with these kind of changes, you innovate and you have to become nimble about what you're able to do. So our board chair was talking to him, and I said, okay, my biggest concern right now is access to resources. We typically would have 41,000 volunteers coming in. Our own employees are concerned about a broad swath of people coming in. We were doing the CDC screenings, but some, asking people to wear a mask. But then we were able to put in place a sort of win-win solution called Get Shift Done, that was a partnership with an organization called Shift Smart, which is sort of a tech startup, and the Communities Foundation, to be able to hire unemployed hospitality industry workers to be able to come and spend their time working with us at the food bank. At the same time, we were also trying to access all the government resources that could be possible for our community. We did put in place a request for the National Guard, and we found out on, I think it was April 2nd, we got a call that said our request had been approved. We had them come in for training on April 4th, the leaders of the platoons, and then on April 6th, we had 288 guardsmen, which would be 2/3 of our workforce, knowing that we have 175 workers that showed up on April 6th, ready to be integrated across our organization. So just as easily as we got them, they were taken away a little over a week ago to be able to help with the civil unrest. We are the only food bank that we're aware of that had our entire National Guard taken to help with the civil unrest, because all of our guardsmen were infantry trained guardsmen. So they were deployed across the state. So there again, we have to be able to pivot and be able to try to use what resources we have to try to meet the demand. So we have learned to become very agile, and we're ordering a lot of food. We have 20 to 25 truckloads of food coming in per day, which is twice what we normally would have. We have increased our distribution to twice what it normally would be. Just to put that in context, the very first year the food bank was open, we distributed about 400,000 pounds of food. We're now distributing over 400,000 pounds of food per day. So, a lot of change from what we had been doing in the past. But, there's benefits that come with that as well, too. We've certainly learned a lot.
Thanks, Chad. Or Stacy, do you want to address that too?
Yeah, I'll just jump in. A couple of things that we've seen that from a challenge standpoint. One is that whereas in January 2020, a senior and maybe a low-income senior could get by without really using technology or their phone, except for maybe chatting or texting with a family member or grandchildren, all of a sudden technology is an imperative. And so not only do low-income people of all ages have a lack of access to good technology, our seniors now actually have to, they're completely now dependent on their phone or computer. Their whole world has changed. And one of the things we found out is that they may have been using their phone, again, for some texting, for some phone calls. They didn't even know how to set up their email on their phone. They were going to the library to check email. The libraries are closed. So, we really at the Senior Source are trying to determine how we address that technology change, because the world at doctor's appointments, all online, ordering all online, and seniors really are not up to speed on that. So that's one of the challenges that we're excited actually to address, but it really became clear with this crisis that it's not an option anymore. It's certainly a requirement. And then finally, our Elder Financial Safety Center addresses frauds and scams, financial frauds and scams for older adults. And you guys, they are rampant throughout COVID. There are fake checks going out. There are more emails than ever, phone calls than ever saying your IRS check is available, come and get it. And it's like whack-a-mole. Every time you have one scam, another pops up. Just recently, something that wasn't a scam is those people who received their IRS checks in the mail. It was a white envelope, no return address, nothing. You open it up and it's a debit card. It doesn't say it's your IRS. It doesn't even acknowledge you as a receiver. And so we had several older adults, actually employees, who almost threw it away because they didn't realize that was their IRS check. So we sent that message out to all city council people and our advocacy team, letting them know, do not throw away that envelope that looks like another scam that we're trying to prevent. So those are two of the challenges that we've had, and kind of working nonstop to make sure that those seniors are technology competent, so they're not left out and left behind in the world, and that they're financially secure.
I think, in addition to the obvious challenges of going from just operating as a restaurant into to packing meal kits and looking at distribution and so forth has just been looking at funding. Just about any foundation that you talk to will tell you that they're not worried about like the rest of this year, but next year and the following year, there's grave concern about, you know, as we are in a recession, what is that going to look like? Foundations are even saying, you know, if they pull funds that are budgeted for next year to save organizations this year, what does that look like next year? So there's a lot of unknown, and I think one of the things that one of the issues that causes is just organizational stability, and by that I simply mean even with the staff. You know, a lot of them are coming in. I don't know anyone in the world that goes to work at a nonprofit to collect a paycheck. You're going into the work because you're got a passion for the population that you're serving, and the emotional trauma that comes with thinking, am I not going to be able to serve this population? Am I going to lose my job? Am I going to lose, you know, in our case, you know, am I going to lose my kids? It's pretty heavy. And then you pack on top of that the fact that it is a global pandemic, and there's so much unknown about COVID-19 and the spread of COVID-19 and the effects that it has on people. We've seen, you know, the stereotypical, it affects individuals with pre-existing conditions, immunocompromised, older people, but it doesn't affect kids, to all of a sudden, you know, a 17-year-old girl in Lancaster that with no pre-existing health conditions that dies. And so you have a lot of staff. I mean, I had one of my amazing employees send me an email at the beginning of all this explaining to me exactly what the coronavirus is, because I might have been unaware. And then making sure that I understood that she was a non-essential employee, to which, you know, I kind of wanted to reply back and say, don't tell me that. That's not a good thing to say right now. But you have to look past that and realize that she's scared. So that was, for us, an opportunity to push for conversation and dialogue with the staff. And instead of saying, well, let me try to figure out a way to make you feel better, to ask the question, what can we do to make you feel better? What are things that we can put into place that make you feel more comfortable? And after about 2 or 3 days of going through that and doing that, we were able to put together safety protocols, staffing, scheduling, dividing the staff into 2 separate shifts, 2 separate teams, not cross-pollinating teams, so forth. And the end result was we actually had a young lady in the middle of May that tested positive, one of our interns, for COVID-19. We were immediately able to contact trace every staff member that had been within 6 feet of her from May 8th, which was her last shift, till the day that she tested positive, and quarantined all of them, sent them all, paid for them all to get the test, and every single one tested negative, which was also kind of a rallying cry and victory for our staff, that it worked, that the fact that we all thought thoroughly of, as far as how do we put safety protocols in place to prevent spread, actually worked. So that was a really great moment. Of course, amidst all of that, we have gone through some heavy amounts of protesting downtown. And of course, the cause of that protesting, the murder of George Floyd, was a heavy burden for so many in our organization. And we had to take a lot of time to take a step back and reflect, and for folks like me, listen, and put together plans of action that showed the staff that our organization stood behind our Black friends and neighbors and colleagues, and as a result, it's been it'll continue to be an ongoing work, and it's work that we've been doing since the day we opened. But it's been our whole staff went from feeling very down and dejected and sad and a lot of despair to feeling a lot of hope, and feeling like that good change is going to come. So that's been, the end result of, I would just like to have a boring week. Just one boring week would be phenomenal. But in the meantime, I'm grateful for being able to go through and test boundaries. And I didn't even mention, amidst all of that, a year ago, we started doing a national series of pop-up dinners with the National Football League and Players Coalition. And part of the process of that was launching our parent company called Momentum Advisory Collective to not only do dinners in different cities and begin to raise awareness, but to actually be able to engage with other organizations and build projects in other cities. So amidst all of the pandemic, we've actually officially launched Momentum Advisory Collective. We've made our first 2 hires, and we'll have probably 4 or 5 more before the end of the summer. And as a group, we're looking at how do we continue to engage and create that level of advocacy when we're landlocked, so to speak. So we can't go around doing pop-up dinners around the country right now, or not necessarily for the foreseeable future. So what does that look like, and how can we continue to engage? So 3 weeks ago, we launched a virtual pop-up dinner series with Players Coalition, and we had youth from 4 different cities that we've done dinners in, pro football players, and some juvenile justice experts all sit and break bread together in their respectively safe places around the country, and had a wonderful conversation, and we're looking to build on that, and keep the momentum going, no pun intended, while we can't travel.
Thanks, Chad. Here's to a boring week for you next week. Last question for me, because I want to open it up to some audience questions, and maybe this one can be a lightning round. But tell me some advice that you might give to other leaders in the business world facing a crisis, based on some of the things that you picked up on over the last few months.
Yeah, so I mean, there are so many learnings that we could probably do a whole webinar just on that. But I think a couple of things that just really stick out is, be flexible, and 80% good is in doing something is better than 100% perfect and not. So it's okay to take risks during this times. It's okay to think about doing something different. We had tested some things that we scaled, and it scaled well. Then there were other things that we had to do, like boxing produce. We didn't have the right boxes to box produce, and guess what? Whenever you put too much produce in a box, and if it sits there for very long, it creates a terrible condition for that produce to stay in an edible form. So you have to learn some things, but we were trying to get things out and get things done as quickly as possible. The other thing I would say, communicate. That means communicate internally, because they don't know what's going on, and what gives them security is to communicate with them. Communicate with your stakeholders. That means the government officials. Thank goodness we had an advocacy program that started before, because the government programs have been critical, because there's been some things about helping those that we certainly have been able to take advantage of. But we had that. So externally with our donors, people that want to know how to be able to help. And just in general with the community, you look at the number of people that are in need for the very first time. They don't know where to go. They don't know where to get access to food, and just being able to help them to help navigate this new scene that they have not ever had to deal with before. And so communication, I think, is key. And then just also, you have to evaluate every part of your organization. If you see a crisis coming up, we've dealt with crises like tornadoes and hurricanes and things that tend to be more temporary in nature. We've had to scale for a certain segment of the population, but this was brand new. There was no playbook for a pandemic that was just so widespread. First thing we did once we knew things were coming up, and this was based upon my crisis communications that I learned at TI, was we assembled our task force. We had a pandemic task force, and there were representatives from across the organization. And thank goodness we put that together, because there were so many issues that we were able to resolve just in that team of working across operations and working with the partners and working with all these various entities, that it would have been difficult, much more difficult, to run the operation if we didn't have that in place. And then listen and learn. So what are the things, and I see this is actually Jenny and Jane's sort of question a little bit as well too, what did we learn from all of this? So we are actually documenting. We have someone internally that is documenting our case study on what we did here. We're using this as our business continuity platform to be able to help sort of round out our business continuity planning in case we have to do this in the future, and we can use it for other crisis situations as well. So we don't want to let this good crisis go to waste. We want to make sure that we're learning from it. And then what are the things that we're doing in this crisis that we should be doing all the time? How do we make those sustainable, and how do we put those forward? I would say one of those is we separated our warehouse shifts into 3 separate shifts. Number 1, for business continuity, in case someone were to get infected, which we have had 2 employees test positive, and thank goodness both of them are going to make a full recovery. One of them is back to work now. The other one is recovering. But if we were to have someone, we couldn't shut down, knowing that 80% of the food of our partner agencies comes from us. It would be detrimental to shut down the food bank. So we separated them, but what we also found is that there's efficiencies in that as well that we should be taking advantage of on an ongoing basis. So that's just one example. And for a nonprofit, the final learning that I would just say, and you can even use this in the business world, is always keep people focused on the why. I think Chad said it earlier, is none of us in the nonprofit space are here necessarily for the paycheck, but it's about the mission. And we have to let our employees know, because I tell you, our employees have worked long hours, they're weary, it's tough work. But if we keep them focused on the mission, if we tell them those stories of those people that they've been able to help, that's sort of the wind beneath the wing, and just getting those words of encouragement, and those donors that are supporting you and that are cheering you on have been great. So I'll leave it at that and let Stacy and Chad share.
Sure, I'll just go ahead. I echo a lot of what you said, Tricia, especially about communicating and just get it out there. Even if it's not perfect, just get it out there because people want to hear from you. And one of the things we actually had to do was create a new value for the organization, and that's be uncomfortable with the uncertainty. There's so much uncertainty right now, and our employees want to plan, they want direction, they're used to kind of every day looking the same. And so we created a value. Our task force, now we have a return to office task force, and every day we come back to be comfortable with the uncertainty, just settle into the gray because it's not going anywhere. So I think, certainly through the end of 2020 and beyond. So we created that new value. And then also, really use your network. People want to help. So seek out your mentors, former business colleagues, and whether that's for, the fundraising world, asking for money or support or advice, people really do want to help. And we actually had a recession plan back in January where I called on some business leaders and donors after hearing a case at Harvard Business School. And so we had a plan for a recession, 5 to 10% revenue decline, not like the bottom dropping out, but it was really helpful. And we're able to go back to those task force members in that recession plan task force to say, here's how we have implemented the ideas that you gave us. So that's been helpful. Again, it was not a pandemic plan by any means, but I was glad to have that tool and really to call on our closest supporters because they do want to help. People really want to help right now, as all of you do. So thank you.
I really don't know what more I could add other than just, I think, providing a lot of compassion and grace and knowing and understanding that things are unstable, they're chaotic. We're all, and I think Tricia already said it, but we're going to make mistakes. People are going to make mistakes. Nobody's going to show up their best because so many things are going on. So, just to lead with a lot of grace and show a lot of compassion and understand that people are scared, they're frustrated, and their words and actions and behaviors are not necessarily reflective of your lack of leadership or their affinity for the organization, but more about just how scared they are in general. So I think compassion and grace are just very important, but totally agree that transparency is huge. Making sure that everyone knows and sees and understands everything that's going on with the organization, and with so much other stuff being unknown, if we can provide a known environment, then that's important as well.
Thanks to all of you. Our first question is from Jane Larkin. Jane, do you want to unmute and ask your question?
Sure. I think each of you have somewhat addressed it. And actually, before I get into my question, I will say my son and I actually volunteered on one of the last shifts at North Texas Food Bank before you guys moved to Shift Smart. And so we were really excited. And there was one more shift after us, and so we posted it on Facebook and told people to sign up because we knew you guys were really in need of volunteers. But it was an awesome way to kind of feel good way to head into all of this uncertainty. But really, I think how and Stacy, you touched on it a little bit with your recession planning task force pre-COVID, but kind of really how are you using this like scenario planning as we look at, what they're talking about potentially the various recovery models that might look, maybe it's a really steep V, where we come out of it really quickly, or a W, or I heard someone refer to one of them as the Nike swoosh this morning, or the L-shaped scenario, and how that's going to impact one, implementing, your operations, or what else you kind of keep going and all of that kind of stuff.
Well, just quickly, one of the things, we have a supply and demand issue. So we're going to have more people needing our services, and there could be a lack of, supply of additional resources as vendors, or there may be some, I think, vendor fatigue as we roll into 2021 about this. But I think keeping things top of mind, stating the need, what we're doing is critically important. I know we're having to look at our employment program, which has really been pretty quiet the last few years because we've been in a full employment environment. Employment, when businesses open up, is going to shoot through the roof. So how can I even shift resources to employment, which it may not be for a long time, but I don't want to hire a lot of people and then not need them in a few years. So trying to shift resources, which is something I think Tricia and Chad know. In the nonprofit industry, you hire one person and they do that job. So really being flexible, and sounds like Tricia's already done that, and trying to be more efficient and letting, trying to see how we can follow where the demand is for services, as well as trying to raise the money.
So I'll just add on to that. We have been looking, because this is a very scary time, and before everyone got on, we actually are going to be doing quarterly forecasts because things are just too fluid right now. We have a base plan that was based upon what we had projected that we had planned to do. Our fiscal year starts in July 1. So we've already had a budget approved by our board, but with the caveat that with things changing so much, we don't know whether it's going to be W. We don't know whether it's going to be a V. We don't know whether we're going to have a second shelter in place if things go, the opposite direction, which we certainly hope not. But, based upon the current scenario right now, we have worked with Boston Consulting Group. And then at the Feeding America level, they've been working with McKinsey and Boston Consulting Group. We also have resources from Bain, all of these pro bono being able to come in and be able to help us to try to predict based upon poverty level and unemployment rates, which, unemployment rates are at a very high level right now, higher than even the Great Recession. So we have predictions on what that might look like. And for what we've seen right now, a lot of people are getting access to their additional stimulus checks, to some additional unemployment benefits. And there's just a lot of uncertainty on how long those benefits are going to last. As we see those taper off and their personal resources start going down, their personal reserves, currently it's predicted that we haven't even seen the peak of demand yet for what we're going to be needing for a food standpoint. People, as they get back to work, they're not necessarily getting the full shifts. That's what we've heard from a lot of the hospitality industry. Restaurants aren't at full capacity. They may be offering shifts. Well, those shifts take away from their unemployment benefit, if they even have that. And then they just don't have enough to be able to meet the needs of their families. So July, August, September right now is predicted to be a peak based upon the current scenario. And they're telling us to be prepared for increased needs for the next 18 to 24 months as the economy recovers and people get back on their feet.
I have no idea. I mean, I think where we're currently looking at is we just redid our budget for the rest of the year, and we actually did several of them based on kind of if then scenarios. We, you know, the restaurant itself is produces more revenue through catering than it does through actual diners coming in the restaurant. So the idea that we could open the restaurant at 50% capacity, making half as much money as we could potentially make in the restaurant with zero catering dollars coming in is makes us from, you know, takes us from being a nonprofit to a super nonprofit, and puts an even bigger fundraising burden on us when there is so much potential fundraising instability. So we've been playing with a lot of if then scenarios. We definitely want to get the restaurant back open, but you know, one of the things I think I failed to mention before is ShiftSmart actually is paying all of our kids right now to the tune of about $40,000 a month total. So if we stop producing meal kits, then we lose that $40,000 a month funding. So there's just a million different scenarios that we're kind of looking at and trying to figure out what is the best case for us. We're tentatively planning on reopening the restaurant in August, but then again, you know, who knows what's going to happen, if there's going to be a second peak, if people, you know, they're going to have to shut things down, or if you know, what's going to drive more than anything is just people's comfortability in going out. And if there isn't a spike in positive cases of coronavirus, then people will stop going out. And so we would walk away from doing a food hub and opening up the restaurant for naught. So there's just a lot of different things that we're continuing to kind of wade through, and quite literally taking it day by day.
Thank you all. And we have time for one more question, and I'm going to call on Jenny King from UT Southwestern. Jenny, do you want to unmute and ask your question?
Oh, well, we may have answered it, Jeff, but I really think all of us can benefit from thinking about how our enterprises have responded to this crisis, for how we move ourselves, you know, into the future. And I really like what you guys have all said. So often I have a comment more than a question. So my comment is, you know, being a communicator and a public affairs person, I always go back to just sharing more. So I think that transparency and that communication with your team, with your stakeholders, with your donors, and with the community about your role in their world is really important. And it's been both, you know, objectively fascinating to watch you all pivot, and also very heartening and hopeful. So I just want to thank all three of you for how you serve our community and what you're doing to make sure that, you know, the tragedy beyond very sick people is that we don't have, you know, just extreme abject poverty take over. We're already, you know, battling that at a high level in Dallas. So that's my comment. Thank you so much, Jeff, and thanks everyone.
Thank you, Jenny. Any final comments from any of our panelists in response to Jenny there?
No, I just thanks, Jenny. Jenny's a huge supporter of the food bank and an advocate for the things that we do. So, and so many of you here on this call are as well. So I just, you know, want to say thanks. And the other thing, a piece of advice that I would have that sort of ring true for us is that relationships matter. And, you know, and I think that's true whether you're in a nonprofit or whether you're in the business world, is just making sure that, you know, continue to cultivate those relationships, because I can tell you it is a very muddy and murky sea out there, especially whenever it comes to the government. But our elected officials have really stepped up, I think, for our community in many fronts, and really trying to make sure that we have that. And if we didn't have those relationships in advance, it would have been very difficult to be able to navigate some of the resources that I think have come into our community as a result. So, you know, that's just one audience, but just know relationships matter and continue to cultivate that. And as I think Jenny said, tell your story. You know, it's really important for people to understand and tell your story as well.
Stacey or Chad, any final comments before we close this out?
Well, this is a great audience, and we're so grateful to be a part of this. I'm going to give one plug. We actually provide air conditioning units to low-income seniors, so we will be handing those out through we raise money through donations and hand them out in a touchless way. Today's our first 100-degree day, so where seniors used to be able to go to senior centers, churches, grocery store to get some cool air, they are stuck at home in sweltering heat. So go online if you're interested in how to support the Beat the Heat campaign and making sure that seniors have air conditioning units.
I just want to say thank you for having me. I'm should not be on a panel with Stacey and Trisha. I should be just sitting and taking notes. They're incredible leaders in our community, and I'm just grateful to be here and listen in on their wisdom and share some time with you all.
Well, thank you, Chad. Thank you, Chad. Thank you, Stacey. Thank you, Trisha. You all have so much wisdom to impart on us, both in the nonprofit world, but also stuff that's equally applicable in the for-profit world too. So thank you all for doing this. As is our tradition, I think as Trisha knows, we will be making a donation in each of your names at the end of our fiscal year to the North Texas Food Bank. So Trisha, you have the benefit of receiving a donation in your own name to North Texas Food Bank. So thank you for that. We will close this out, but please visit ndcc.org for a list of our upcoming programs.